Hi, I'm Tanya. I spent 3 years building an AI app meant to help families like mine, but mine used it to erase me. My father handed it to my sister. They stripped my name, called it her vision, then smiled for the cameras. And when the $2 million deal I secured fell apart, he cried. But was it regret, or just the collapse of a lie they thought I'd stay silent about? They say when something good finally happens, you feel it coming. I didn't. I was too busy chasing deadlines, organizing version logs, tweaking UI contrast colors at 2 a.m. I'd poured 2 years of my life into building that app, night after night, driven not by promises of stock options or interviews, but because I believed in what I was creating. This wasn't some trendy social tool. It was a system that could actually help caregivers detect early signs of Alzheimer's in their aging parents. Something real. Something with soul. That morning, I brewed my usual black coffee, opened my laptop, and clicked on the link a friend had forwarded. The future of personalized AI launches today. A soft pride fluttered in my chest as I leaned into the screen. My fingertips hovered over the keyboard, already imagining the wave of congratulatory messages. But when the homepage loaded, the flutter stopped. There it was, our product, our architecture, our mission, but not our team. Founder Visionary, Valerie Mack. I read it again, slower this time, hoping the words would rearrange themselves, but they didn't. My name was nowhere on the page, not under technical lead, not even in the About Us section. Just gone. I refreshed the page. Nothing changed. Maybe it was a mock-up, a placeholder. Maybe Dad hadn't approved the final site. I clicked Inspect and checked the metadata. Authored by Mac Digital Team. No error. No trace of me. For a moment, I just stared. The coffee had gone cold, untouched. The line from my old mentor echoed in my head. Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. I used to believe that. But this wasn't about talent or work ethic. This was erasure. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house in Palo Alto. We had planned a casual breakfast, Dad, Valerie, and me. The usual ritual, him reading the Wall Street Journal at the head of the table, Valerie on her phone, and me trying to pretend like the tension didn't cling to every silence between us. They were already laughing when I walked in, flipping through a stack of glossy press kits. Valerie looked up with a smirk. "Oh, good. You're just in time to help us review the photo selects. Some of them are killer." Dad chimed in without looking up. "Val really nailed the investor-ready tone. And the lighting? We should have used that photographer years ago." I took a deep breath, set my keys on the counter. "Hey, I saw the website. It says Valerie's the founder." Valerie rolled her eyes. "It's just a media strategy, Tanya. You know how these things go. Clean narratives. One face, one name. It's easier for investors to latch on." Dad shrugged. "It's about market presence. We're all part of it, but some stories are easier to tell." The eggs on my plate suddenly felt like rubber. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly and chewed through the silence, every bite duller than the last. They didn't forget me. They edited me out. Later that afternoon, I opened a link on my phone from a tech publication covering the product launch. "AI with a Heart," the headline read. The article gushed about the mission, the impact, the woman-led innovation. I scrolled to the bottom. There it was, a photo, a minimalist backdrop, clean lighting, Valerie in her beige blazer, smiling with every tooth. Dad stood next to her, proud and practiced. I was at that shoot. I remembered the way the assistant had positioned me on the far left. I remembered the jokes I cracked that made the room laugh. I remembered posing next to the UI interface screen I'd spent 6 months designing. But in the final image, I was gone, cropped out like a coffee stain. I pulled up the raw footage I still had saved. There I was, smiling, speaking, animated. A flicker of me that had survived someone else's scissors. So this is how it starts. Not with a fight. With silence. That evening, a ping from my phone broke the tension. A text from a college friend. "Saw your sister's launch. Didn't know you were working with her. Looks amazing." I stared at the message, then typed back, "Yeah, thanks." Deleted it. A minute later, an email notification lit up. Subject: Congrats. It was a junior VC from a panel we once pitched to. He had CC'd Valerie and added me in as a courtesy. Awesome work, Val. Tanya, thanks for the back-end support. Looks like you pulled it off. Back-end support? I opened our Dropbox folder where I had stored all the original investor proposals. The latest one was a PDF. Slick formatting, redacted contributors, only Valerie's name listed on the credits page. No mention of me, not even in the footnotes. They're rewriting the origin story before my eyes, but I didn't confront them. Not yet. I needed to see how far they'd go. As the sun dipped, I drove to Stanford's campus and parked near the old engineering hall. The breeze rustled the leaves overhead as I walked the familiar path. I passed the benches where I used to eat lunch during internships, the courtyard where I once pitched the prototype of this very app at a hackathon. Back then, I thought my ideas alone were enough. I didn't realize that people could take your ideas, package them with better smiles, and convince the world they dreamed them first. My phone buzzed again. A calendar reminder. The press event. Next week. The speaker list was attached. I wasn't on it. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't forgotten. I was being erased. When I walked into the kitchen that morning, the air was thick with the smell of bacon and maple syrup. The sound of laughter curled around the edge of the hallway before I stepped fully into the room. Valerie's voice was front and center, as usual, animated and clear, pointing to something on her iPad. Dad chuckled softly at whatever she was showing him, a deep, familiar sound I hadn't heard directed at me in weeks. I stood for a second by the fridge, unnoticed, watching them from behind the island. Valerie was flipping through a new slide deck, bright, minimalistic graphics, big, bold titles, Empathy AI, Tomorrow's Care, Today. I recognized the template. I had designed it during a late-night binge on oat lattes and technical frustrations, now perfectly repackaged and scrubbed of anything that looked like me. I cleared my throat gently, easing into the room. Valerie barely glanced up. Dad offered a distracted, "Hey, honey," and returned to the screen. "Did you sleep?" he asked after a beat, eyes still glued to the presentation. "Some," I said, easing into a chair that used to be mine by default. "I stayed up finalizing the back-end transitions." Valerie smirked, never looking up. "You still do that all night. We've streamlined most of that. No need for the grind anymore." I smiled tightly, lifting the coffee pot. The mug was empty, and so was the spot where my name used to sit on the server's root access. But I didn't bring it up yet. I needed more than guesses and suspicion. I needed proof. After breakfast, once I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop to sync up last night's code. Minor bug fixes, really, but critical for performance. The loading icon spun longer than usual. Then it stopped. Access denied. I blinked, tried again, the same message. I opened GitHub, checked the repository. I wasn't listed as a contributor anymore. Confused, I went through the admin panel. The owner name had changed. Valerie Mack. My hands tightened around the trackpad. I wasn't just locked out, I was deleted. It took me 10 minutes to find the nerve, and another 5 to actually press call on Dad's name. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, sweetheart, everything okay? Did you change the server permissions?" Pause. Just long enough for me to feel the shift. "Oh," he said slowly. "Yeah, it's just temporary. Makes admin flow smoother. We're consolidating a few layers. Valerie's handling the logistics side for now." She's listed as owner. "It's just structure, Tanya. You're still core to the product. It's just the infrastructure side we're reorganizing." "That infrastructure is the entire product," I said quietly. He didn't respond. I heard papers shuffling in the background. "You're overthinking this," he finally said. "Focus on your strengths." That phrase stuck like a thorn in my chest. I wanted to ask whose strength had built the code from scratch or stayed up 73 hours during the integration of the learning model, but I said nothing. I called Valerie next. She picked up fast. "You locked me out of our system." "Correction," she said coolly. "I streamlined our environment. You hate DevOps anyway. And security was getting messy. You still have access to the branches you need." "I don't need a branch," I said. "I need ownership." Valerie gave a small laugh. "Tanya, this isn't personal. We're just optimizing. You're brilliant at what you do. Let me handle the front-end presence and structure. You're not just the face now, you're listed as the founder. She didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was with clipped finality. Dad and I discussed it. We needed a lead, clean branding. My breath caught. I felt like someone had written me out of a story I hadn't finished telling. The next day, Mom invited me to brunch. I went because I needed a reminder that somewhere in this mess, there was family. The table was already full when I arrived. Valerie was glowing, literally. She had on a silk blouse I didn't recognize and a confidence I didn't either. "I've got something," Mom said after we'd all taken a few bites. She pulled a velvet box from her purse. "This belonged to Grandma. She said the most presentable one should wear it when the company goes public." Valerie gasped, her hand flying to her chest before the necklace even appeared. Inside the box was a delicate gold chain with a single pearl, the one Grandma used to wear every Christmas. Mom stood up, leaned over, and clasped it around Valerie's neck. I stared. No one looked at me. No one asked if I remembered the nights I spent with Grandma, drafting our mission on her old Dell laptop. She could barely see the screen, but she sat beside me, murmuring thoughts while I typed. I didn't speak. I just buttered my toast and chewed slowly, keeping my face still as the weight of something unseen pressed harder behind my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I dug through the drawer by my bed and found a note card Grandma once gave me, one she had slid into a book about resilience. I read the words again. "Not all light shines loud. Sometimes it works better quietly." I used to love that quote. It felt like a balm, an explanation for why I didn't need applause or interviews. But that night, under the harsh light of reality, it sounded like an excuse I had outgrown. The next day, around 6 p.m., I logged into the company Slack. I wanted to check if anyone had asked about the system sync. But when I opened the workspace, I wasn't there. No profile, no mention. I checked founders under the team list. There was only one name, no exit message, no handoff, just gone. The silence wasn't just loud now. It was official. 2 days had passed since the brunch and the necklace. You'd think time would dull the sting, but the silence only got sharper. I hadn't left the apartment much. The blinds were down. My laptop sat on the desk like a monument to something no one remembered but me. Valerie was all over my feed. News segments, headlines, hashtags, empathy, AI redefining care. A new face in female tech innovation. My face wasn't one of them. The living room glowed faintly from the TV, tuned to a tech news channel I hadn't bothered to change. Valerie's voice filled the room like white noise I couldn't shut off. She was smiling on screen, waving to the crowd at some press event, standing beside a banner I designed. The tagline read, "AI Solutions for Personal Empowerment." My stomach turned. It wasn't rage that filled me, not yet. It was something colder, a stillness that settled into the bones and refused to budge. I sat in my chair, hands folded, watching a world that had moved on without me, built with pieces I'd handed over too willingly. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't noise, it's the silence that follows. Out of reflex more than purpose, I opened the Dropbox folder labeled Founders Admin. I hadn't touched it since launch week. Inside were the original incorporation docs, investor briefs, strategy memos. I scanned the PDFs until I stopped at one marked Revised LLC Filings. I opened it. There, clear as day, was the transfer of the company's legal ownership. Domain, trademarks, LLC, moved from Tanya Denise to Rex Hoyerman Holdings, signed 6 months ago. Dad had quietly filed every document, shifting control without a word. I checked the notary date. It was around the same time Valerie had asked if I wanted her to handle logistics for a bit. My hand reached for the phone. He picked up quickly. "Hey, sweetheart." I was reviewing the LLC documents. A pause. "Right. Yeah, we had to do some cleanup for tax purposes. You didn't think I should know my name isn't listed anymore? It's not about control, Tanya. It's about streamlining. You're still the heart of the work." "But I'm no longer part of the foundation," I said, quieter than I intended. "Legally? No. But that doesn't mean we don't value. I ended the call, not out of spite, out of exhaustion. I stared at the monitor again. The login screen was blank. No notification, no updates, just static. If I had to rebuild, I needed a place to begin. I searched my inbox for the earliest emails tied to the product's conception. Mock-ups, feedback loops, coding blueprints. Most were buried under team inbox threads or co-signed under Valerie's tech lead. Not a single official communication credited me by name. I opened a draft reply to a venture partner I'd once pitched to Solo. I typed, "Hey, just clarifying my role," and then deleted the line. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but nothing else came. I stared at the blinking cursor until it became unbearable. The world doesn't care who built the bridge, only who cuts the ribbon. Just when I was ready to shut it all down, my phone buzzed. "Eklutna Annie, saw the app on TechBite. It's your handwriting. You okay?" A pause cracked the numbness. She was my lab partner in Stanford's AI ethics program. We hadn't spoken since the year I graduated. She always had this uncanny ability to spot code style like others recognized handwriting. I hesitated, then replied with a single emoji. Seconds later, another message. "Let's meet. I found our old hackathon pitch. The clip with you speaking. It's time-stamped." I hadn't thought about that video in months, maybe longer. Now it might be the only thing left that proves I ever existed in the story. I told her I'd follow up. Then I pulled out my old drive from the bottom drawer. It was dust-covered, but functional. I connected it, watching as files popped onto the screen like memories surfacing. Early UI maps, handwritten journals scanned into folders, audio notes recorded during late-night design sprints. I even found sketches I'd done on napkins, digitized and stored under Ideas Not Crazy. Proof wasn't the goal anymore. Preservation was. This wasn't about showing the world I was right. It was about making sure I didn't disappear just because someone else said I should. I printed one of my earliest mind maps, an ugly, lopsided spiderweb of connected concepts, and pinned it on the corkboard above my bed. Even if they win the press, I'm keeping the origin story. As the day faded into night, I sat back down at my desk and clicked open a folder labeled Stanford Hackathon 2018. There it was. The video. My voice filled the room. My younger self, nervous but certain, standing in front of a whiteboard, explaining the app. This platform is for families. For caregivers who don't get a second warning, it's for those who forget, from those who won't. I watched it twice, then I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it Contingency Plan. If they were going to rewrite me out of the story, I'd write a better one. The first time I opened the teaser deck, I was still in my pajamas, hair pulled up in a lazy knot, spooning cold yogurt out of a glass bowl. I wasn't expecting much. It was just a forwarded investor packet Valerie's team had posted publicly. But as I scrolled past the splash page, a jolt of ice ran through me. They'd taken my blueprint and turned it into a fashion pitch. My original tagline, "Helping families understand dementia through AI," had been replaced with "Transforming personal branding with predictive AI." The color scheme was flashier. Fonts were bolder. Every image was some impossibly perfect influencer holding a phone, grinning as though empathy could be filtered through a ring light. I clicked deeper. The layout, module placements, data flow order, even the call-out boxes, was my flow. Rearranged for aesthetics, but still mine. It was like hearing someone else singing a song I'd written, off-key, but with better lighting. They didn't just rename it. They rewrote its soul. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling the back of my neck heat. Then I composed a brief email. "Hi Val, just noticed the new deck. Can you clarify the updated positioning? I thought we'd agreed the core mission was elder care support. Let me know." I hit send. Her reply came within the hour. "Market realities require flexibility. Be proud it's being seen." I typed a response. This wasn't built to sell lipstick. Then I deleted it. I sat back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let the silence thicken. This wasn't just erasure anymore. It was exploitation. They had turned vulnerability into product. My mission had been reshaped into a slogan they could monetize. It reminded me of the nights I'd spent next door, coding from my neighbor's kitchen table while watching over her mother, Lucia. That's what I'd named the AI prototype, after Lucia, who once forgot she'd already eaten and tried to make toast 3 times in an hour. I remembered sitting beside her, one eye on the monitor, one on the stove. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Make something people can't just use, but feel. That's what I used to write at the top of every whiteboard. Now that app, the one I'd built for caregivers, was being pitched as a social metrics enhancer for online personalities, and Valerie's face was on every screen. Later that afternoon, I needed out. I grabbed my bag and headed downtown, figuring a walk would help. It didn't. I ducked into a tech cafe on Market Street, ordered an espresso, and scanned the room, hoping to disappear into background noise. That's when I saw him. Ethan. Of all people, it had to be Ethan. We dated briefly in college, long enough for him to memorize my coffee order and ghost me right before finals. He was standing near the barista, scrolling through his phone with the same smug half-smile I used to mistake for charm. He looked up. "Tanya?" I froze. "Ethan." Wow. We exchanged the awkward nods and "how have you beens" that follow every bad ending. "I've been good," he said. "Actually, my firm's working with this incredible startup right now. Female-led AI platform, major buzz lately. You might have heard of it?" I stared. "You're doing legal for Valerie's company," I said flatly. He blinked, then smiled sheepishly. "Well, yeah. Small world, right?" "You know who actually built that code, right?" I asked, not blinking. He gave a half laugh. "I mean, what matters is who can carry it forward, right?" I didn't answer, just nodded once, then turned back to my drink. My stomach twisted. Theft wrapped in polish is still theft. I left the cafe without saying goodbye. As night fell, I wandered toward South Park, a pocket of the city where founders like to pretend their garage offices are the birthplace of revolutions. I walked past glass windows filled with whiteboards and beanbags, the glow of hustle still alive behind them. They were building things. I had built something. But now, someone else was collecting applause for it. I stopped by a bench near a lamppost, pulled out my phone, and opened the Notes app. Document version history. Send to third-party dev. Backup local log files. Archive wireframes. I saved it. I wasn't just going to protect my name. I was going to protect the work. They could sell all the slogans they wanted, but I wasn't letting them sell my silence too. The next morning, as I booted up my laptop, another notification pinged through. An event reminder. Investor Showcase. Empathy AI. Beta reveal. Location. Soma Convention Center. Featured session. Lucia. AI for the age of authenticity. My jaw tightened. I wasn't listed as a speaker. Of course not, but my app was. They were using the name, using the beta, the same infrastructure I'd built with 6 months of my life and half my sanity. I stared at the screen for a moment, then whispered to no one, "Let's see how well they pitch a soul they don't understand." I wasn't invited to the show, but neither was the truth. I'll be there anyway. I stepped into the investor showcase dressed in plain navy slacks and a blazer I hadn't worn since my last solo pitch. No entourage, no badge, just a quiet resolve tucked under my arm in the form of a leather-bound notebook and a thumb drive. I walked past the registration desk with a nod. No one questioned me. They rarely do when you carry yourself like you belong. That part, at least, I had learned from watching Valerie. The event hall buzzed with the kind of networking noise that sounded more rehearsed than genuine. Glass walls framed the space, casting distorted reflections of tech bros and polished executives. Espresso carts in the corners offered fuel for confidence. I kept to the edge of the room, drifting between product displays and panel previews until I spotted her. Valerie stood near the main stage, surrounded by half a dozen people. She gestured toward a screen showing a demo of the app. My app? She spoke in animated bursts, dropping terms like adaptive sentiment mapping and real-time predictive response, words I'd written into white papers long before she ever understood them. The crowd nodded, impressed. My photo was up there too, one from 3 years ago when we were still co-developing the early prototype. but I wasn't named. Just background noise in the montage. They're building castles on sand, I muttered under my breath, and calling it silicon. A week ago, that presentation was supposed to be mine. I had spent every night preparing the pitch deck, rehearsing my narrative arc, perfecting the data visualizations. The morning of the presentation, as I zipped my bag and grabbed my slides, Dad pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Valerie's going to take the lead today," he said gently, like he was offering me tea. "She's got the energy, the polish, and the media's already responded well to her." "But this is my pitch," I said, stunned. "She didn't even write the deck," he patted my shoulder. "You'll be involved, sweetheart. Just let her open. Investors respond better when they see cohesion." That afternoon, I watched from backstage as Valerie took my opening line, word for word. "If you silence someone long enough," I'd once written in a blog post, "they learn to listen better than anyone else." I didn't cry. I didn't walk out. I took notes. And now I was back. Not for revenge, but for clarity. After Valerie finished her pitch and stepped off stage to a burst of applause, a woman I recognized from the PR team approached me. Elizabeth Roberts, perfectly pressed blouse, clipboard in hand. "Tanya, hi," she chirped, pretending not to notice I wasn't wearing a badge. "We've been meaning to reach out." I raised an eyebrow. "We'd like to list you as a founding advisor," she said brightly, "just to acknowledge your early involvement." I folded my arms. "What does that mean legally?" She blinked. "Oh, it's an honorary title. No vote, no equity, but you'd be featured in our brand story." I almost laughed. Almost. "Let me guess," I said. "You want me in the footnotes, but never in the room." Elizabeth hesitated, smiled too quickly, then turned to answer a call. I walked away without another word. My silence, this time, wasn't submission. It was clarity. At the back of the event space, I found a quiet bench and opened my tablet. I pulled up my personal archives, early prototypes, concept sketches, audio notes from brainstorming sessions, all time-stamped, all mine. I uploaded a post to a private repository with a public link. Original development logs, for reference. No accusations, no names, just truth. Minutes later, a junior developer from another startup retweeted it with a caption, "This is the cleanest time-stamped progression I've seen. Real work speaks for itself." I let the silence ripple outward. Near the coat check, as I prepared to leave, Valerie appeared. Her heels clicked like accusations. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice low and tight. I turned, met her eyes. "Reminding people who wrote the first line of code." She blinked, as if that hit harder than yelling ever could. Dad approached, trying to diffuse. "Girls, come on, let's not turn this into a—" I faced him fully. "You didn't just hand her the mic. You handed her my voice." Valerie shifted her weight, unsure whether to play victim or victor. I didn't give her the chance. I walked around both of them and didn't look back. Before I left the venue, I checked my phone. One investor had commented on the thread, "Why wasn't she on the stage?" I stared at it for a moment, then looked across the hall at Valerie, still smiling for pictures. They erased my name from the banners, but the crowd just found out who drew the blueprint. Dinner was already on the table when I arrived. I'd parked a block away, not out of habit, but because I needed the short walk to compose myself. When I stepped into the house, the familiar scent of rosemary chicken and citrus glaze filled the air, Mom's signature recipe for anything that was supposed to feel like home. The dining room was lit too brightly for comfort. Valerie sat at her usual spot, mid-sentence, eyes glinting as she described some investor's reaction to the polished delivery. Rex sat across from her, nodding along, wineglass in hand, the same way he used to nod when I explained data sequences, except back then he actually listened. No one looked up when I entered. I pulled out a chair quietly and sat. My plate had already been filled, the chicken steaming, the silverware tucked just slightly off-center. Not even that space felt like mine anymore. "So," Valerie said, wiping the corner of her mouth. Tech Beacon just ran the story. Front page. They called the presentation seamless, said we embodied next-gen AI ethics wrapped in accessibility. She looked to Dad. You should have seen their faces, Rex chuckled. You really did command that room, Val. I didn't speak. I watched my fork nudge into a slice of lemon. The conversation flowed around me like I was a decorative chair someone forgot to move out of the way. You okay, Tanya? Mom finally asked. Her voice had that edge of obligatory concern. I've got a few files I need to wrap up, I said, pushing my plate forward. Just dropping in. No one asked what files. No one paused. I stood, nodded, and walked out without dessert. By the time I got home, it was almost 9. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to my desk. The laptop had gone to sleep, so I tapped the spacebar. The startup screen blinked twice, then nothing. Just the Apple logo, a progress bar. Welcome. I waited. Something felt off. When it finally loaded, my desktop was clean. No icons, no sticky note reminders, no folders titled MVP Final, Really Final, just the default wallpaper and a welcome tutorial window I hadn't seen since the first time I booted this machine. My hands moved quickly. Finder, documents, backup folders. Empty. Every file. Gone. I sat back, my heart thudding against my ribs. I opened Terminal, ran a quick command for logs. System wiped. Factory reset. It wasn't a crash. Someone had done this. I grabbed my phone and called Rex. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, Tanya, what's up? My laptop's been wiped. He paused. Oh, yeah, I meant to call. We needed to sanitize some sensitive files before the next phase. Valerie flagged some vulnerabilities. I stood up. You wiped my machine. We didn't delete anything important, just protected assets. It's standard protocol. You had no right, I said. That's 2 years of... Calm down. You should have backed it up, Tanya. My voice dropped. They weren't just files. You didn't just delete data. You deleted a record. He sighed. Let's not blow this out of proportion. We're streamlining. I ended the call without another word. I stood in the dark for several minutes, staring at the blank screen, the cursor blinking like a silent accusation. Then I opened my bottom desk drawer, dug past a pile of receipts and notebooks, and found the old flash drive I'd hidden months ago. I plugged it in. Partial archives, early builds, some code snippets, a few UX drafts. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. I didn't cry. I pulled on a navy blazer, tied my hair back, and grabbed my keys. If I couldn't access my history through my own system, I'd get it another way. I drove straight to the office. The building was quiet. It was almost 10 p.m., but the security light inside buzzed softly. I walked up to the front entrance and held up my key fob. Nothing. I tried again. No response. I stepped back, tried the secondary access panel, still locked. Footsteps echoed behind me. A junior developer, Sam, came walking up with his earbuds in. He looked startled to see me. Oh, Tanya, he said, tugging one bud out. Valerie updated access last night. Something about reorganizing admin levels. I nodded slowly. Thanks, Sam. He hesitated, then disappeared inside after the door buzzed open for him. I stood still for a beat. Then I turned and looked at the lobby wall. There it was, the new poster. A glossy render of our app interface, centered beneath a bold heading. Empathy Engine. In the corner was my original UX layout, still clearly visible, unchanged. They had built a wall with my blueprint, and then used it to keep me out. I went back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and started compiling notes, timestamps from emails, screenshots from code commits. I opened a fresh document titled Legacy Reconstruction. Not for lawyers. And not yet. For me, this wasn't revenge. This was recovery. Later that night, after hours of sorting through emails and Slack exports, I wandered into a cafe for a cup of tea. The place was mostly empty. I took a seat near the window, let the quiet wrap around me like armor. My phone buzzed. Instagram. The company account had posted a photo. Founding team, day 1. I clicked it. The image was from the old group shoot. My shoulders were visible in the edge of the frame, but my face had been blurred, cropped so closely around Valerie and Rex it looked deliberate. I stared for a moment, not angry, just certain. They didn't just close the door behind me, They repainted it like I was never there. The first thing I saw when I opened my laptop was nothing. No pings, no shares, no replies to the quiet bombshell I had dropped online the day before. The timestamps, the development log, the blueprint. The world outside was moving at full speed while mine stood still. I scrolled absently through my feed. Valerie's face beamed back at me from a TechCrunch banner, holding a mic mid-sentence, all sharp angles and curated ambition. The headline called her the face of empathetic innovation. Another click, and there she was again, this time on LinkedIn, sandwiched between congratulatory comments from investors and former classmates who once ignored her in algorithms class. I opened the latest Stanford alumni newsletter. Innovator Spotlight, Valerie Mack. It read in bold serif font, my university, my work, her face. They'd institutionalized the lie. I closed the laptop softly. No slamming, no curses, just the quiet hum of betrayal humming around me like old static. I sat there for a long time, the morning light crawling up the walls, trying to feel the outrage that should have come. But it was buried under something older, something duller. An hour later, I called the alumni office. "Hi, this is Tanya Denise," I said carefully. "I'm calling about the most recent Innovator Spotlight email. It lists Valerie Mack as the founder of Empathy AI. A pause, then a polite voice. "Yes, that's correct. The information came from press materials submitted by the company." I inhaled slowly. "I have proof that I authored the original system. I was the architect of the product you're celebrating." "Well, if you'd like to submit a correction, we can take it under consideration." I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I thanked her, hung up, and walked to my printer. 10 minutes later, I added a fresh page to the growing binder I'd labeled Receipts, my original hackathon registration form, my name, the idea, the date. No Valerie in sight. Later that afternoon, I got an alert about the public beta launch. I hesitated, then clicked through to the site. The homepage opened with a gliding animation of the app dashboard, my dashboard. The layout, flow, transitions, everything was the same. But when I clicked the Team tab, I stopped breathing. Under Tech Stack and Architecture, Valerie was listed as Lead Developer and UX Designer. My name wasn't there, not in the footer, not even as a consultant. I clicked again, opening my own archive of the original wireframes. I compared them side by side, pixel for pixel. They matched. I remembered struggling with that exact sidebar alignment during a Red Bull-fueled sprint at 3 a.m. I sat back, eyes narrowing, then opened my email and typed out a message. Subject, confidential review. To Amelia Grant, Principal Engineer, NVIDIA. Body. "Hi, Amelia. I hope you're well. I'm attaching a layout comparison. You worked with me on the early version. Let me know if this looks familiar." Her reply came hours later. "I know your work. Anyone who's seen your layout knows. You're not crazy." That was all she said. But it grounded me more than any grand apology could have. I logged into a tech forum under a pseudonym and posted the side-by-side comparison with no context. Just development timeline, from prototype to polish. Thoughts? Within the hour, comments rolled in. "This is a match. Someone cloned this. I remember this layout from the AI Summit in 19. This wasn't Max." I didn't reply. Just watched. The buzz kept building, quiet but undeniable. That evening, I took a train to Stanford and walked across the quad to the office of Dr. Henley, my old mentor. He'd written my thesis recommendation, helped me push through the imposter syndrome every time a male colleague forgot I was leading a meeting. He opened the door before I knocked. "Tanya," he said, stepping aside. "I've been expecting you." I handed him the binder. Voice memos, prototype screenshots, side-by-side slides, pitch excerpts. He sat down, flipping through each page with that same silent precision he used when grading exams. "You don't need to prove this to me," he said at last. "You need to protect it." I nodded. "I'll connect you with a group that handles IP protection. They're discreet, no strings. They'll make sure this doesn't get swept under a PR rug." "Thank you," I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. This industry doesn't erase people with malice, Tanya. It does it with branding decks. I left his office feeling neither victorious nor bitter, just clear. As I stepped out into the fading light, my phone buzzed. A text from Valerie. "We need to talk. Things are getting messy." I stared at the message for a long time, then I whispered to no one. No, now it's getting clear. She wanted a conversation. I was preparing a record. I walked into the convention center without a badge and without a team, only a quiet plan, and my dignity zipped into the side pocket of my coat. The place was electric. Branded banners hung from the ceiling beams, each one bearing the sleek, curated font of Empathy AI. Valerie's face was on the event booklet cover, smiling, perfectly lit. Photographers milled around the check-in table, groups gathered in clusters, balancing lattes and rehearsed laughter. I kept to the edges of the room, blending in with quiet purpose, slipping past camera angles and pre-event selfies until I found an empty seat one row behind the investor block. Valerie stood behind the curtain of the main stage, mic already clipped to her lapel. Rex leaned in, whispering something, probably reminding her of the talking points I'd drafted 2 months earlier. Her hands fidgeted with the cue remote. She built the outfit, I thought, watching her posture shift. I built the bones. The lights dimmed. The music pulsed. Valerie stepped into the spotlight. Her first words rang out like clockwork, precise, memorized, well-practiced. Her cadence mimicked my rehearsal videos almost perfectly, down to the mid-sentence pauses. But her eyes darted. Her pitch wavered. Something inside her was misaligned. Then came the first curveball. A VC in the second row raised his hand. "Can you elaborate on your approach to asynchronous model learning in high-variance data clusters?" Valerie blinked. We use predictive sorting to adapt the learning curves." Rex stood, ready to interject, but the investor cut him off. "Let her answer." Another hand rose. "This looks awfully similar to a Stanford project I reviewed a few years ago. Same interface, same predictive modules." Valerie tried to respond, voice rising. "We developed this in-house. I led the architectural design. But the room was already shifting. Investors looked at each other. A quiet skepticism bloomed. Murmurs traveled like wildfire down the rows. Then Cressida Lyon, lead investor, old school, razor sharp, closed her laptop with finality. "We need to reevaluate," she said calmly. "The foundation isn't as clear as we thought." I didn't move. Just typed one line into the Notes app on my phone. It cracked without me saying a word. The screen behind Valerie flickered as the moderator stepped up awkwardly. "Thank you for the presentation. We'll take a brief intermission." Valerie stepped down, pale and tight-lipped. That's when the real hammer dropped. In the fourth row, a woman held up her phone. She turned the screen toward the crowd, and I saw it before she even said a word. A tweet. "Stanford Hackathon, 2018. Video. Tanya Denise presenting the first prototype of what would become Empathy AI. Caption. Shed justice for the real founder." The video played on loop. My face, my voice, my explanation of the predictive empathy model, same interface, same logic, and now, on record. Gasps rippled across the audience. Valerie froze. Rex attempted a chuckle. "Early inspiration, you know how these things evolve?" A journalist in the aisle typed furiously. Another took a photo of the screen. The moderator leaned into the mic again. "We're ending this session early. Please proceed to the networking hall." I stayed seated, hands folded. No gloating, just breath. It wasn't about winning. It was about being seen. As the crowd began to scatter, I slipped out the side aisle and headed for the main corridor. Whispers followed, eyes turned. Halfway down the hall, my phone buzzed. Text from Peaches Jackson. "I always knew it was you. Let's talk soon." Another from Dr. Henley, a single thumbs-up emoji and a link to the video. "You don't always need a microphone to be heard," I whispered. I walked past the velvet rope toward the elevators. Across the lobby, near the corner glass, I spotted Rex and Valerie. She was pacing in tight, angry circles. He sat slumped on a bench, rubbing his temples. I didn't approach. But they saw me. An intern bumped into me near the coat check. "You're Tanya, right? We didn't know," she stammered. I smiled softly. "You will." By the time I reached the front door, the notifications on my phone were doubling by the second. Mentions, reposts, comments. When I got home, I made tea, sat down, opened the laptop. The hackathon video had passed 400,000 views. The top comment? "She built the legacy." They tried to auction it off. I smiled, not wide, just enough. My inbox dinged. Subject: urgent. IP inquiry from Journal. They built a stage to silence me, but I turned it into a spotlight. Tanya woke before the sun, the blue hue of her laptop screen reflecting in her tired eyes. Her inbox pinged constantly, dozens of emails from strangers, acquaintances, industry names. One subject line blinked again and again. "We see you now." It wasn't just tech news or PR requests. There were notes from other women in startups, one-liners like, "Your story hit me hard," and longer messages that began with, "I thought I was the only one." She walked to her window. The morning fog still clung to the trees. She whispered, almost unconsciously, "There's a different kind of quiet after the storm. It's not empty, it listens." The knock came at 9:12 a.m., sharp, not a buzz, an old-fashioned, insistent knock. Tanya opened the door to see Rex and Valerie. Valerie's mascara had bled into her under-eyes. Rex's shirt collar was wrinkled, his usual smugness absent. "We just need 5 minutes," Valerie said, voice thin but rehearsed. Tanya stepped aside, more curious than accommodating. Valerie sat, but Rex paced. "The investors, they're out," he said. "The deck's burned, the trust is gone." "They think we misrepresented things," Valerie added quickly. "But if you came forward, if they saw you on board, really on board, maybe—" Tanya folded her arms. "Is this about doing the right thing, or needing a lifeline?" They didn't answer immediately. Tanya didn't push. She didn't need to. "Now you're asking for something you never gave me, recognition." Rex opened his mouth to defend himself, but nothing came. Tanya saw it in his eyes, the realization that this wasn't about pride anymore. It was survival. Her thoughts churned. Desperation and regret smell nothing like humility. They left soon after, empty-handed. By noon, Tanya was sitting at her desk, prepping for a scheduled call. A European medical tech firm had reached out via LinkedIn with a curious phrase: "We want to speak with the mind behind the code." The video call began. A poised woman with a slight French accent greeted her. "We watched the Investor Day footage. The pitch, the Stanford archive, the raw data doesn't lie." Tanya simply nodded. The woman continued. "We're interested in building something with you, not your past company, you." It wasn't just flattery, it was clarity. They cited lines Tanya had written herself. Architecture logic she could explain with her eyes closed. "We're prepared to discuss terms for a new platform, clean structure, medical partnerships, full credit. Genuine innovation comes from lived empathy, not borrowed gloss." Tanya blinked, steady. "I'm listening." By 2 p.m., after they signed off, she felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but the weight of adrenaline slipping away. Her apartment was silent again. She stepped outside, barefoot, into the tiny community garden. The soil smelled like memory. "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you," she whispered, quoting Maya Angelou. "I told it. Now I need to decide what to do with the silence that follows." She spent the next few hours sketching. Logo drafts, platform names, value statements. On a sticky note, she wrote in thick Sharpie, "Not to prove them wrong, to prove me right, rooted." That's what she would call it. Honest tech, grounded mission. At 6:47 p.m., a delivery man arrived with a thick envelope. Return address, a law firm. The seal read, "Confidential." Tanya opened it slowly, carefully slicing through the adhesive, "Cease and desist." Unauthorized use of proprietary structures. Misappropriation of trade secrets. At the bottom, Herr Rex Heuermann, CEO. She held it for a long time. Not angry, not even shocked. Just one thought. They came asking for my help and followed up with a threat. The letter lay flat on my kitchen table, its words sharper than any knife in the drawer. Unauthorized use of proprietary technology, it read. Violation of intellectual property ownership. The firm tone reeked of corporate indifference, signed by a name I knew too well, Rex Hoyerman. It was as impersonal as it was violent. I read it twice, then a third time. There was no rage in me, just a quiet echo of finality. Their threat wasn't new, it was just louder now. Funny, I thought. All that effort to silence me, only to find my silence was too powerful to control. I slid the letter aside. My inbox pulsed with unread messages, but one subject line held my gaze. I believe in your voice. Let's rebuild. From Peaches. When I opened her email, it was like reading the first page of a story I thought I had lost. Attached was the proposal I wrote almost a year ago. My own words, my diagrams, my dream. Peach's note was short, but potent. I always save what's honest. You weren't erased from my desk. Her message confirmed timestamps, authorship, and her interest in funding something clean, untangled by past betrayals. Innovation is only as real as the hands that built it, she wrote. My reply? Just 2 words. Let's talk. 2 days later, we met at a co-working space in San Jose. Glass walls, whiteboards, the low hum of makers and founders pushing their next idea into the world. The room smelled of possibility. We signed an intent agreement on a Thursday morning. Rooted would be our platform, a mental health-focused AI tool designed not for market optics, but for human need. Non-profit-oriented, community-run data loops, real-life feedback systems. Peaches didn't hover or impose. She simply said, "You build it, we'll follow." I reached out to developers I had mentored, including Anna, an intern who sent me a message after the showcase. You don't know me, but I know your work. If you ever build again, I'd be honored to learn. Anna was the first hire. On the folder of our shared drive, I typed our name. Rooted. Tech that remembers where it came from. I took my next meeting at the same coffee shop where I once planned late-night UX prototypes alone. This time, I brought 2 supporters, Dr. Henley, my former professor, and Luca, the developer who reposted my architecture breakdown online with the caption, "This is the original spine." We drank quietly. Then I said, I'm starting again, not to fight them, but to outlive them. It felt right. Justice wasn't the fuel anymore. Clarity was. Later that week, I received a Google alert. Valerie and Rex's company had lost 2 key contracts. One of the articles ran with the headline, "The Silent Founder and the Startup That Forgot Its Roots." Apparently, 2 investors had demanded independent IP audits. A PR firm pulled back. Internal credibility unraveled. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't post a tweet. Let them lose loudly. I'll build quietly. Then came the first milestone. Peaches texted me a screenshot. Our bank transfer notice. First official funding. I stared at the number. Not millions, not yet, but it was real. My inbox pinged with a subject line that slowed my breath. Partnership inquiry. HealthBridge, NGO. They wanted to meet Rooted's founding team. No drama, no press spin, just the real. I opened a blank doc and titled it, Our Story. Not to counter anyone else's version, but to finally write mine. The soft hum of early morning filtered through the large glass windows of our new office in San Jose. I arrived just as the sun stretched itself across the buildings. The air held that crisp, focused quiet I had only ever found in the earliest hours of creation, not of code, but of resolve. I greeted the team with a warm nod, placing a small ceramic candle on my desk and lighting it, a ritual from the days when my apartment smelled of burnt coffee and unmet deadlines. Back then, it was survival. Now, it was space. Space I carved with my own choices, not in spite of anyone, but for myself. We'd just been featured in a healthcare tech magazine, not because of scandal, but because our mission had teeth, real ones. Stories like ours don't often end up celebrated unless they come with blood. But here we were, quiet, unbothered, and thriving. That peace was interrupted by a headline. The same investor who once whispered to me in the restroom had written a public editorial. My name in print, not surrounded by damage control, but by admiration. Some leaders don't shout. They steady the ground others stand on. I didn't need applause, just recognition. I printed the quote, pinned it behind my monitor, and moved on. Still, I smiled. Later that week, Valerie came. Unannounced. Like a ghost I'd already buried. She stood at the glass door for a full minute before I buzzed her in. Her posture was collected, but her face bore the signature smudges of panic and sleepless nights. 5 minutes, she said. I nodded. Respect, not obligation. She didn't waste time. What you've built here is good. I mean really good. The press is noticing. Investors too. There's room to bring our visions back together. You know, merge the best of both worlds. I didn't flinch. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt, Valerie. Some are meant to remind us why we crossed the river. She opened her mouth, closed it, and left. I watched her walk out without turning around. No door slammed, no yelling, just the final sound of a click, one I wouldn't reopen. That evening, I sat with my journal and wrote what forgiveness now meant to me. It wasn't grand, it wasn't poetic. Forgiveness isn't inviting someone back into the room. It's choosing not to carry them forward in your pocket. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just whole. For the first time, I felt I knew the shape of my own skin, and it didn't require someone else's permission to fit. I flipped back to my notes from early rooted planning, scribbled a line in the margin. Not all love belongs in the same room forever. Weeks earlier, I had mentored a young intern who reminded me too much of my younger self. Smart, nervous, always second-guessing. You're not a shadow, I had told her. You're a signal, the first one. That day, we sat across from each other, brainstorming UI design that didn't just serve, but soothed. AI shouldn't manipulate, I said. It should mirror, just enough so we know we're still in the picture. She nodded, took notes, and I handed her a notebook. This one's yours. Don't write for validation, write for clarity. Rooted was more than a venture. It was who I became when I wasn't trying to correct anyone else's narrative. And then, just before the evening wrapped, an email arrived. Subject: Founding Innovator Nomination, National AI Ethics Awards. Your name came up in every board discussion. Quiet strength is loud now. I read it twice, closed my laptop, whispered aloud. I didn't go back. I moved forward. That night, as I turned off the lights and looked around the quiet hum of our space, I knew this. Not every door needs to be reopened. Some are best turned into walls we never lean on again. The lobby doors opened to reveal a hallway lined with names etched on polished glass. Founding Innovators of AI Ethics. I stepped into the glow, feeling the weight of each etched name that once stood between me and recognition. Today, mine was among them. Tanya Denise, engraved on a crystal trophy under the Founding Innovator category. Past recipients, mostly men who'd once spoken over me in boardrooms and classrooms, flashed back to me like ghosts in tailored suits. I breathed in calm confidence. I wore minimalist silk, no flash, simple, steady. No need to announce myself. As I held the trophy's base, the words echoed inside me. Power is not just in who speaks, it's in who doesn't need to yell anymore. The host approached the podium under the auditorium lights booming softly. This year, he began, we honor someone who created integrity not through disruption, but persistence. Slides flickered behind him. My earliest user flows, the hackathon scene with me pointing at my whiteboard, community testimonials in voices that had mattered when my own had been silenced. I walked to the stage as they played. Organizers had recast the university's old alumni brochure in real time, correcting my name prominence in the sidebar. Earlier that day, Valerie's last-ditch attempt to file an injunction failed when the judge ruled her claims unfounded in a public statement. I inhaled the room's hush and spoke. Justice doesn't require vengeance, just a clear record. The applause rose, not for spectacle, but for truth restored. While I spoke, my phone buzzed. A message read, "Breaking. Hireman Mac Enterprises declares bankruptcy. Investors cite breach of trust, failure to disclose founders." A litany of investors tweeted condemnations about concealed IP ownership. Valerie released a public apology video shortly after, but her voice lacked conviction, a glossed apology that felt performative. The news feed erupted. One message, "A lesson learned, but too late." Another arrived, an anonymous screenshot. The Wikipedia page original to me had changed again. This time, Valerie's name removed entirely. My gaze caught in that moment. They tried to brand me out of the future. I built a future with no room for branding. The gala ended. I stepped out onto the balcony under a sky heavy with city lights. Peaches joined me, as did Dr. Henley. Neither spoke at first, holding glasses of water. Then Peaches rested her hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just win. You survived with clarity." I nodded, voice soft. "Thank you." What mattered most wasn't the trophy. It was the space to breathe again. Dr. Henley raised his glass gently. We clinked. No cheers, just the quiet satisfaction of closure. I realized applause had come before, but peace had found me only now. Later that evening, as I relaxed in my apartment, a new email popped up. Subject: "I'm leaving the industry. You win." It was from Valerie. My fingers hovered, then typed. I didn't play to win. I walked away to not lose myself. I deleted the message immediately after sending. I clicked into Rooted's website, updated the About page, no mention of betrayal or forgiveness, only mission, code, community. Before bed, I edited the footer text, "Built with memory, run on truth." I opened my journal to the final page of the year. The pen hovered before I wrote. Then, steady and deliberate, I signed my name, not performance, but statement. On my desk, that framed cease and desist letter stood, stamped in red, rejected. I stood over it for a moment, then turned off the light. In the quiet after, I whispered, "Let this be the last chapter they'll never overwrite." Some stories don't need to be retold, just protected, permanently.